Why did no one call her name when the mission was assigned? She sat at the edge of the briefing table, hands folded, listening. Men spoke over each other, voices sharp with urgency, the clatter of paper maps and the hiss of radios filling the room. Orders came quick, clipped, targets, timelines, extraction points, but her name, it wasn't there. She didn't raise her hand, didn't demand to be noticed. She never did. But that night silence would turn toward her, and so would history. Outside the forward operating base, the desert wind howled. Fine dust slid under the door, scratching across the floor like whispers. She pulled her cap lower, adjusted her gloves. She was ready, always ready, but readiness didn't earn attention here. Glory went to the loud ones, the ones who fought for recognition. She never fought for it, and maybe that's why it found her. Her name was Captain Mara Ellison, call sign Vera. Few knew the meaning, fewer cared, but it mattered to her. A name her grandmother had whispered on her deathbed, Vera, from the old word for truth. It was the only thing Mara had ever sworn to carry, truth, even in silence. A young lieutenant brushed past her, muttering curses under his breath. He didn't notice her. They rarely did. She had been in the unit for nearly 2 years, yet she felt invisible. They saw a sniper, a pair of sharp eyes behind glass, a trigger finger steady as stone. They didn't see the woman who carried ghosts in her chest. But the mission tonight was different. The colonel's voice echoed. Extraction priority is the informant. He carries names. If those names are lost, whole villages will burn. We move at 2200. No mistakes. No mistakes. She looked down at her hands, remembering another night. Another mission, the one she never spoke of, the one that had carved a shadow through her. That shadow was the reason she sat in silence now. The reason she had promised herself she wouldn't lead, wouldn't speak, wouldn't volunteer. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The informant wasn't a stranger. He had once been her translator, her ally, her friend. And the last time she saw him, he was running into the flames of a house she couldn't save. Now he was in enemy hands, marked for death, and she was sitting in a room where no one would even say her name. The clock ticked, the room emptied, boots slammed against concrete. She stood only when the last man had left. Alone in the fatting buzz of fluorescent lights, she placed her hand on the map. Her finger traced the route. Every turn, every alley, every rooftop. She memorized it, not for orders, not for glory, for him. She whispered, so quiet only the dust could hear, "I won't let you die this time." The convoy rolled out under a moonless sky, engines rumbling, steel grinding, radios hissing. She rode in the last vehicle, pressed against the window, watching shadows blur past. The night smelled of oil and earth. She could taste the copper dryness in the air. "Hey, Captain," a sergeant called from across the bench. "You good?" She nodded once. He studied her, then grinned. "Quiet one, huh? Bet you're a thinker." She didn't answer. He chuckled, leaned back, closed his eyes, but his voice stayed in her head. "Quiet one. Yes." And yet tonight her silence carried more than anyone knew. As the convoy slowed near the village outskirts, tension thickened. Radios cracked, orders spilled. Men moved out, rifles raised, eyes cutting through the dark. She slipped from the vehicle, boots sinking into sand. The village ahead was hushed, as if holding its breath. No dogs barked. No children cried, too quiet. She knew the feeling, ambush. "Positions," the lieutenant barked. Men scattered, taking cover. She climbed a broken wall, crouched low, rifle steady. Through her scope, the world shrank to shadows and movement. A curtain fluttered. A door cracked open. Her finger hovered near the trigger, breath calm, heartbeat even. She saw what others missed. She always did. And then she saw him. Dragged through the dirt, hands bound, face bruised but unmistakable. The informant, her friend. Her chest tightened. Memories slammed back, his laugh, his careful English, the way he once told her he dreamed of becoming a teacher after the war. And now he was stumbling, half dead, toward the building where he would vanish forever. She wanted to call it in, wanted to shout, but her throat locked. No one had asked for her eyes tonight. No one had asked for her truth. And yet, contact left, a soldier fired, the night exploded. Gunfire lit the alleys, shouts pierced the dark. The team split, bullets sparking off stone. Mara stayed still, scope locked. Through chaos, she saw him pushed inside. A door slammed. She exhaled, cold, measured. The mission was slipping. The team was blind, but she was. Her voice trembled as she keyed the radio. Target building, north side, 2 guards at the door. Silence. Then, who is this? She swallowed. Captain Ellison, call sign Vera. Another pause. Then the colonel's voice, sharp, doubtful. Copy, stand by. Stand by, always waiting, always silent. But she couldn't stand by this time. She broke from cover, moved low, shadows wrapped around her. Her pulse steadied, not racing. Every step was deliberate. She had done this before, too many times, but never with this weight in her chest. Behind her, gunfire roared. Ahead, the door loomed. She could almost hear his voice again. You saved me once, Captain, don't forget. Her hand tightened on the rifle. She wasn't seeking glory. She never did. But glory was already waiting at that door. Why did no one call her name when the mission was assigned? She sat at the edge of the briefing table, hands folded, listening. Men spoke over each other, voices sharp with urgency, the clatter of paper maps and the hiss of radios filling the room. Orders came quick, clipped, targets, timelines, extraction points, but her name, it wasn't there. She didn't raise her hand, didn't demand to be noticed. She never did. But that night silence would turn toward her, and so would history. Outside the forward operating base, the desert wind howled. Fine dust slid under the door, scratching across the floor like whispers. She pulled her cap lower, adjusted her gloves. She was ready, always ready, but readiness didn't earn attention here. Glory went to the loud ones, the ones who fought for recognition. She never fought for it. And maybe that's why it found her. Her name was Captain Mara Ellison, call sign Vera. Few knew the meaning, fewer cared, but it mattered to her. A name her grandmother had whispered on her deathbed, Vera, from the old word for truth. It was the only thing Mara had ever sworn to carry, truth, even in silence. A young lieutenant brushed past her, muttering curses under his breath. He didn't notice her. They rarely did. She had been in the unit for nearly 2 years, yet she felt invisible. They saw a sniper, a pair of sharp eyes behind glass, a trigger finger steady as stone. They didn't see the woman who carried ghosts in her chest. But the mission tonight was different. The colonel's voice echoed. Extraction priority is the informant. He carries names. If those names are lost, whole villages will burn. We move at 2200. No mistakes. No mistakes. She looked down at her hands, remembering another night. Another mission, the one she never spoke of, the one that had carved a shadow through her. That shadow was the reason she sat in silence now. The reason she had promised herself she wouldn't lead, wouldn't speak, wouldn't volunteer. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The informant wasn't a stranger. He had once been her translator, her ally, her friend. And the last time she saw him, he was running into the flames of a house she couldn't save. Now he was in enemy hands, marked for death, and she was sitting in a room where no one would even say her name. The clock ticked, the room emptied, boots slammed against concrete. She stood only when the last man had left. Alone in the fatting buzz of fluorescent lights, she placed her hand on the map. Her finger traced the route. Every turn, every alley, every rooftop. She memorized it, not for orders, not for glory, for him. She whispered, so quiet only the dust could hear, I won't let you die this time. The convoy rolled out under a moonless sky, engines rumbling, steel grinding, radios hissing. She rode in the last vehicle, pressed against the window, watching shadows blur past. The night smelled of oil and earth. She could taste the copper dryness in the air. "Hey, Captain," a sergeant called from across the bench. "You good?" She nodded once. He studied her, then grinned. "Quiet one, huh? Bet you're a thinker." She didn't answer. He chuckled, leaned back, closed his eyes, but his voice stayed in her head. "Quiet one. Yes." And yet tonight her silence carried more than anyone knew. As the convoy slowed near the village outskirts, tension thickened. Radios cracked, orders spilled. Men moved out, rifles raised, eyes cutting through the dark. She slipped from the vehicle, boots sinking into sand. The village ahead was hushed, as if holding its breath. No dogs barked. No children cried, too quiet. She knew the feeling: ambush. "Positions," the lieutenant barked. Men scattered, taking cover. She climbed a broken wall, crouched low, rifle steady. Through her scope the world shrank to shadows and movement. A curtain fluttered. A door cracked open. Her finger hovered near the trigger, breath calm, heartbeat even. She saw what others missed. She always did. And then she saw him. Dragged through the dirt, hands bound, face bruised but unmistakable. The informant, her friend. Her chest tightened. Memories slammed back, his laugh, his careful English, the way he once told her he dreamed of becoming a teacher after the war. And now he was stumbling, half dead, toward the building where he would vanish forever. She wanted to call it in, wanted to shout, but her throat locked. No one had asked for her eyes tonight. No one had asked for her truth. And yet, contact left, a soldier fired, the night exploded. Gunfire lit the alleys, shouts pierced the dark. The team split, bullets sparking off stone. Mara stayed still, scope locked. Through chaos she saw him pushed inside, a door slammed. She exhaled, cold, measured. The mission was slipping. The team was blind, but she was. Her voice trembled as she keyed the radio. "Target building, north side, 2 guards at the door." Silence. Then, "Who is this?" She swallowed. "Captain Ellison, call sign Vera." Another pause. Then the colonel's voice, sharp, doubtful. "Copy, stand by." Stand by, always waiting, always silent. But she couldn't stand by this time. She broke from cover, moved low. Shadows wrapped around her. Her pulse steadied, not racing. Every step was deliberate. She had done this before, too many times, but never with this weight in her chest. Behind her, gunfire roared. Ahead, the door loomed. She could almost hear his voice again. "You saved me once, Captain, don't forget." Her hand tightened on the rifle. She wasn't seeking glory. She never did. But glory was already waiting at that door. She froze, back pressed to the wall, listening. The guards shifted on the other side. Their boots scraped. Cigarettes crackled. A murmur of laughter. She closed her eyes for 1 second. 1 second to breathe, to summon the face of her grandmother, the sound of her father's voice, the image of the boy she once left behind to come here. Every ghost touched her, not to haunt, but to steady her. She opened her eyes, clear, cold, ready. But still her finger shook. Not her aim, not her trigger, her left hand. The hand that had once held her translator's wrist, pulling him from a burning street 3 years ago. She had let go too soon, and the memory never released her. Now she was here, and so was he. She lifted her radio again, whispered, "I have eyes, confirm order." Static, then only silence. The colonel's voice never came. And in that silence she chose. Her rifle cracked. 1 guard dropped. The other froze. She moved before he could. Knife, quick, quiet. His body slumped against the wall. She caught it, lowered him gently, as if even the dead deserved dignity. She pushed through the door. The air inside was thick with sweat, smoke, and the metallic tang of blood. A single light bulb swayed. Shadows rippled across cracked walls, and in the corner, slumped, broken, but alive, was the man she had come for. His eyes lifted. Recognition flickered. A gasp, almost a laugh, escaped his swollen lips. "You." Her throat closed. She raised her finger to her lips. Silence. Not yet. Why did he smile through swollen lips when he should have been broken? She froze, rifle up, her heart punching against her ribs. The dim bulb above swung, casting shadows across his bruised face. He was barely holding on, yet the corner of his mouth lifted, not mockery, not delirium. Recognition. Mara, his voice cracked like paper burning. Her name, not Vera, not Captain Ellison, her name. It stopped her cold. She had not heard it spoken like that in years. In this place she was called signs and ranks. To him she was still human, still the woman who had once shared bread in silence under a broken sky, waiting for artillery to end. Her throat tightened. For a moment she wanted to drop the rifle, to kneel beside him, to remind him that they had both survived that night long ago. But the sharp sting of voices outside the door yanked her back. Enemy boots scraped against stone. They were coming. She crouched, lifted him carefully. He gasped, muscles seizing, but he didn't scream. He was still disciplined, still holding himself together. She half dragged, half carried him to the wall where shadows ran deepest. "Stay," she whispered. His hand gripped hers with surprising strength. "They will kill you." Her eyes narrowed. "Not tonight." Footsteps drew closer. A burst of laughter. The creak of rifles slung lazily across shoulders. She steadied her breath, leveled her rifle toward the door. One heartbeat, two. The door opened. Her shot split the silence. One man dropped instantly. The second stumbled, spraying bullets into the ceiling. Sparks and plaster rained down. She swung, squeezed. He collapsed. The building held its breath again. But not for long. Shouts erupted outside. Flashlights swept across alleys. She could hear the captain barking orders in her earpiece, too far behind, unaware she was inside. And then the colonel's voice. "Vera, confirm your position. Say again, confirm." She pressed the transmit button but said nothing. If she answered, they'd order her to fall back, to wait, to lose him again, and she would not. Instead, she whispered only to the man slumped beside her, "We move." He shook his head weakly. "I can't." She cut him off, eyes sharp. "You can, you must." For a moment she thought he might resist. But then she saw it, that flicker of trust in his eyes. He had trusted her once before, and even though it had ended in fire, he trusted her now. She lifted him over her shoulder. His weight drove into her spine, heavy, suffocating. She gritted her teeth, adjusted, forced her legs to carry him. Each step was agony, each sound outside sharper than a blade. Through a back corridor she moved, every sense alive. The smell of damp plaster, the tick of a leaking pipe, the distant cough of an old engine. She knew this building type: storage rooms, 2 exits, one likely blocked. She found the rear door and pressed her ear to the wood. Voices, 2 men arguing. She couldn't understand the words, but the tone was enough. Boredom, distraction. She set him down, pressed a finger to her lips again. He nodded, eyes fierce with pain but silent. The door cracked open. Her knife flashed. One man fell before he even registered her. The second lunged, wild. His rifle clattered against the wall. She twisted, drove her shoulder into his chest, blade sliding under his ribs. He gasped once and collapsed. Her pulse pounded, but her hands were steady. She dragged the bodies aside, wiped her blade, lifted him again. The night outside was chaos. Gunfire stitched across rooftops. The team had engaged fully now, fighting block by block. Flares hissed overhead, bathing alleys in ghostly light. She felt exposed, carrying him through it, but she had no choice. "Captain Ellison," a voice screamed through her earpiece. The colonel, furious now. "You're off mission, fall back, that's an order." She wanted to tear the radio off. Wanted to scream at him that this wasn't off mission, this was the mission. But all she did was keep moving, boots sinking into sand and ash. Every shadow threatened. Every corner could hide death. And yet, with him on her shoulder, she felt more alive than she had in years. At one alley she stopped, pressed against a wall, breath harsh. His weight was crushing her. Her legs trembled. "You'll die for me," he rasped. She turned her head slightly. "No, I'll live for you." And in those words, she realized the truth. This wasn't about him alone. It was about the piece of herself she had left burning years ago. Saving him was saving her. A burst of automatic fire ripped past, chipping stone inches from her head. She dropped, rolling, shielding him with her own body. Sparks danced across her arms, stinging. She hissed, aimed, fired. The shooter fell. She dragged him behind cover, chest heaving. He looked at her, blood running from his temple, eyes sharp with something between admiration and sorrow. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. She shook her head. "I never should have left." They stayed there for a moment, pressed into the dirt, listening to the war rage around them. Her mind flicked through fragments of memory, her father's last letter unread for years, her mother's silence at the airport when she enlisted, the faces of comrades who never made it back. All of it pressed into her. But here now, carrying him through this fire, it felt right. Not glorious, not heroic, just right. Then the sergeant's voice cracked through the radio. "Colonel, we've got eyes on Ellison. She's moving east." So they had seen her. The colonel again. "Ellison, stop now. You'll compromise the entire unit." Her jaw clenched. For a second she thought about obeying, about dropping him, raising her hands, pretending she hadn't seen, hadn't acted. It would be easier, safer. She would go back to being invisible, silent, forgotten. But then she felt his hand grip hers again, weak but certain. And she knew she could never go back. She rose, dragging him upright. Together they moved east, away from the flares, toward a strip of darkness where the village thinned into dunes. Her legs burned, her vision blurred, but she kept moving. Somewhere behind her she could hear the colonel cursing, the lieutenant shouting, the team fighting to keep up. But she and the man she carried were no longer part of their war. They had their own. And in that war, silence would become everything. They collapsed behind a crumbled wall at the edge of the village. He slid down against the stone, breath ragged. She knelt, checked him quickly, pulse weak, wounds deep. But he was alive. She pulled a small flask from her vest, tilted it to his lips. He drank, coughed, whispered thanks. His eyes glistened in the dark, reflecting faint starlight. "Why?" he asked. "Why risk it?" Her throat closed. She had no words at first. Then softly, "Because I couldn't lose you twice." Silence stretched between them, a silence thicker than all the gunfire. And in that silence, glory found her, not in medals, not in speeches, in the simple act of saving one man who had once believed in her when no one else did. But the night wasn't over, the war wasn't done, and she knew this was only the beginning. The sound of engines cut through the night, vehicles, too many, too close. Her grip on the rifle tightened. She glanced at him, saw the fear in his eyes, saw his lips part as if to tell her to leave him. But she already knew her answer. She would not leave. Not this time. Why did the engine sound closer than the gunfire? She pressed herself against the crumbled wall, holding her breath. Headlights swung across the dunes like sweeping blades. Dust churned in the dark. Enemy reinforcements. Not just a patrol, this was a hunt. Beside her he tried to rise. His arms trembled, body broken, but his pride still fought. She pushed him gently down. "Stay low." He coughed, winced, but his eyes burned. "If they find us, both die." She looked at him, jaw tight. "If they find us, I'll make sure only one does." He froze at her words. She meant them, he knew it. The vehicle skidded to a halt. Doors slammed. Boots hit sand. Voices shouted orders in clipped urgency. Searchlights flickered across broken walls and twisted alleys. She steadied her rifle, sighting through the scope. In her ear, the colonel's voice thundered again. "Ellison, you've compromised the mission. Hold position and wait for extraction. Do not engage." Her lips pressed thin. Wait, extraction. No, there was no waiting, not anymore. Her finger hovered over the trigger. She could feel the thump of her pulse in the barrel. One beam of light swept toward their wall. She shifted, took the shot. The soldier dropped. Shouts erupted. Gunfire split the night. "Move," she hissed, grabbing him, dragging him further into shadow. Bullets shattered stone around them. Dust stung her eyes. He groaned but forced his legs to move, leaning into her, half walking, half falling. Through the scope of chaos, she glimpsed her own men at the far end of the street, pinned by crossfire. The lieutenant was shouting, firing wildly. The sergeant who had called her quiet was dragging a wounded comrade. For a second she considered running to them. But one glance at the man she carried, his face pale, lips trembling, eyes searching hers, and she knew she couldn't. Her war was here. A mortar round whistled overhead. The impact threw her to the ground, sand raining, ears ringing. Her vision blurred. When it cleared, he was beside her, clutching his ribs, eyes wide. "You'll die," he rasped again. She shook her head, pressing her forehead to the dirt. "Not tonight." And then another memory struck her. Her brother's voice, years ago, a porch swing in late summer. He was laughing, teasing her for enlisting. "You'll disappear over there. No one will remember your name. You don't chase glory, Mara. You'll vanish." She had smiled back then. Let him think her silence was weakness. Let him believe she was running from something. But the truth? She wasn't running. She was waiting. Waiting for the moment when silence would matter more than shouts. And now here, under fire, dragging one broken man through the dark, she realized this was it. The engines roared again. Enemy soldiers advanced, fanning through the ruins. They were methodical, ruthless, searching every corner. It was only a matter of time. She pulled him behind another wall, pressing her hand over his mouth as footsteps crunched nearby. Her heart thundered so loud she feared they'd hear it. A soldier paused just feet away, lit a cigarette. The flame flared, reflected in his eyes. He exhaled smoke, muttered to himself. She waited, counted each second like a blade. 1, 2, 3. Then she struck, silent, swift, precise. His body crumpled. She lowered it gently, eyes hard. The man she carried watched her, breath shallow. "You've changed," he whispered. Her hands stilled. For a heartbeat she almost broke. Changed? Maybe. Or maybe this was who she had always been, the one no one saw until the night demanded it. "Don't look at me," she said softly. "Just hold on." She lifted him again. The alleys thinned into open ground. Ahead the dunes stretched like waves frozen in moonlight. The desert was vast, merciless, and their only chance. She adjusted her grip, forcing her legs to move. Each step was a battle. Sand shifted beneath her boots. His weight crushed into her shoulders. Her lungs burned. Still she pressed on. Behind them shouts grew louder. Lights cut across the sand. She could hear engines revving again. They were being hunted like animals. "Captain Ellison," the colonel roared in her earpiece. "Stop now, that's an order." She tore the radio from her vest, hurled it into the sand. The silence that followed was brutal, almost holy. For the first time all night her head cleared. No voices, no orders, just her, the man she carried, and the desert. And the sound of pursuit closing in. They collapsed at the ridge of a dune. She dropped him gently, fell to her knees, chest heaving. Sweat soaked her uniform. Blood from his wounds smeared her hands. He looked at her, eyes glassy. "You'll kill yourself." She forced a bitter smile. "I've been dead for years." He reached, touched her hand weakly. "No, not dead, just hidden." Her breath caught. Hidden. Yes, that was the word. She had hidden herself behind silence, behind obedience, behind the shadows of louder men. But here, now, there was no hiding. A flare burst overhead. The desert lit like noon. She shielded her eyes, heart sinking. They were exposed. Gunfire erupted from the ridge behind. Tracers sliced the night. Sand sprayed. She grabbed him, dragging him into the shallow pit of the dune. Bullets hissed overhead. She pressed close, whispering in his ear, "Listen, if I fall you crawl, you don't stop." His eyes burned. "I won't leave you." She shook her head. "Don't argue, promise me." He swallowed, then nodded once, promise made. The sound of footsteps approached, shouts in a language she half understood, orders to spread out, to search the dunes. Her fingers gripped the rifle tighter. She felt the familiar stillness slide over her, the sniper's calm. The world narrowed to breadth, distance, angle. The first silhouette crested the dune. She fired, he dropped. Another. Each shot precise, deliberate, but for every one she felled, more poured forward. Her heart pounded, not with fear, with certainty. She knew this was unsustainable, knew they would be overrun, but she also knew every shot, every second she bought was one more chance for him. And maybe for her too. Her vision blurred again, fatigue clawed at her, memories tangled with reality. She saw her grandmother's frail hands pressing a locket into hers. Truth, Mara, even when the world denies it, live it. Truth, not medals, not recognition, truth. And the truth was this: she wasn't seeking glory. She never had. But glory had found her here, in the silence of a desert night, carrying one man against the weight of an army. The man beside her stirred, his hand gripping hers again. Weak, trembling, but real. "Why do you fight like this?" he asked, voice breaking. She turned her eyes to his. For the first time she let him see the wound she carried. "Because last time I let go." He swallowed, understanding flooding his gaze. And in that moment, despite the bullets, despite the endless dark, she felt lighter. Not redeemed, not yet, but closer. The desert wind howled, light swept nearer, shadows closed in. She lifted her rifle again, steady, unyielding. Not tonight. Not while she still had breath. She didn't say a word when the colonel folded the map and dismissed the team. The others filed out in pairs, muttering about gear checks and final adjustments, but she stayed behind. Her hand rested on the table where the grid squares still burned in her mind. Coordinates that meant little to most, but to her, they were personal. Why? Because someone she once knew, someone she once trusted was there, or so the intel claimed. She hadn't told the others, not yet, not until she was sure. Outside, the desert evening pressed like a blanket, heavy with dust and heat. The horizon was a line of fire where the sun bled into distant ridges. She moved with the team toward the Humvees, but her pace slowed. Her eyes traced the silhouette of each soldier as if memorizing them. A habit. She didn't believe in luck, only preparation. And part of preparation was knowing who you might lose. The driver, Reyes, caught her look and raised an eyebrow. Something wrong. His voice carried a casual ease that didn't fool her. He was scared. They all were. "Nothing," she answered. But the way she said it was too sharp, too quick. She saw the flicker of doubt in his expression before he climbed in behind the wheel. On the ride out, silence reigned. No music, no chatter, only the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. She kept her rifle across her knees, thumb grazing the safety. Every bump in the dirt road vibrated up her arms. Her body stayed tense, but her face was still, unreadable. Someone in the back finally spoke. It was Carter, the youngest, barely 20. His helmet sat slightly crooked and sweat carved a line down his cheek. "Hey, you ever think about what we'll do after?" His words floated nervously, almost childlike. No one answered at first. Then Reyes snorted. "After? There is no after, kid. There's just the next mission." But she looked back. She held Carter's gaze for a second longer than necessary. "After," she said quietly, "is the reason we make it through tonight." The boy blinked, surprised, maybe even comforted. But in her chest, those words carried weight she didn't share. After meant something different for her. After meant she could finally stop running from the past. If she came face to face with him, if he was truly there, then the silence of years would break. The convoy slowed. Headlights cut across ruins, concrete bones of a village once alive with voices, now only wind. The smell of smoke lingered, faint but sharp. Somewhere dogs barked. Somewhere else a door slammed. They dismounted. The air seemed thicker here, the kind that clings to skin. She adjusted her pack, tightened her sling. The colonel whispered instructions: breach, clear, secure, simple words, dangerous execution. She moved with them down the narrow street, her boots crunching grit. Every doorway looked like a mouth, waiting to swallow them. Every rooftop a shadow that could spit death. Then a sound, not gunfire, not shouting, just singing. A child's voice, soft, off-key, coming from an alley. Her breath caught. "Stay on me," the colonel hissed, motioning them forward. But she slowed. The song wasn't random. It was a lullaby, the same one her mother used to hum when she was too scared to sleep. Her pulse hammered. Who here would know that melody? Reyes glanced back. His lips formed a silent question. She shook her head, forcing her legs to move, but her mind burned. Coincidence or something else? They reached the door. The stack formed. She was third in line. The charge went off, splintered wood, dust, and echoes. Then chaos, shouts, the pop of rifles, the room lit with muzzle flashes. She pressed inside, shouldering the corner, scanning left, right. Figures dropped. Screams mixed with commands. In seconds, the air turned metallic with the scent of blood. And then she saw him. Not the man she had come for. Not yet, but another, a captive. Bound, gagged, eyes wide with terror. He couldn't be older than 15. His body shook like a leaf. Carter rushed forward to cut him loose, but she grabbed his arm. "Wait." Her voice was low, steady. She scanned the shadows again. Something was wrong, too easy. The boy's eyes darted to the ceiling. That was all the warning she needed. "Down," she hissed, shoving Carter flat. A blast tore through the upper wall, showering plaster and nails. A trap, set for anyone rushing in blind. The colonel barked orders, suppressing fire, sweep the rafters. Chaos surged again. Through the haze, she saw movement, someone slipping through a back exit. A tall figure, familiar in a way that cut her breath short. She couldn't move, couldn't shout. Not yet. Because if it was him, if after all these years he had aligned himself with the enemy, then everything she'd believed about loyalty, about trust, was a lie. And worse, tonight might force her to prove it. Her rifle trembled in her grip, not from fear, from the war between her orders and her heart. No one else noticed the figure vanish into the dark, only her, and she stayed silent. For now. Because if she spoke, if she revealed what she thought she'd seen, everything about this mission would change, and she wasn't ready to let them know. Not yet. The night deepened, pressing heavy on her shoulders as if the sky itself leaned closer to listen. She sat on the rubble of a collapsed wall, helmet resting in her lap, eyes fixed on the shifting glow of a lantern one of the men had set down. Around her, the team regrouped, checking weapons, whispering, forcing steadiness into their hands after the firefight. But her thoughts weren't steady, not after what she'd seen. Why hadn't she told them? Why hadn't she said his name? She closed her eyes, and for a moment the dust and gunpowder gave way to a memory, an open field back home, grass tall enough to brush their knees as they ran. His laugh carried on the wind, sharp and unguarded. He'd been her anchor then, before the world fractured, before choices drew lines they could never erase. Her chest tightened. She couldn't afford to dwell, not here, not now, but the memory bled through anyway. Reyes broke her silence. He crouched nearby, studying her like he was trying to read a language he didn't speak. "You froze back there." Not an accusation, just a fact. She didn't look at him. "I didn't freeze, I calculated." Calculated. His voice carried a hint of doubt. "If I hadn't pulled Carter down, he'd be gone right now." That ended the conversation. For a while. Reyes nodded slowly, jaw working, then stood and busied himself with his gear. But she knew he was still watching her from the corner of his eye. The colonel returned from a short, tense radio exchange. Intel was right. High-value targets moving through the district tonight. We tighten the net. We don't lose him. Her stomach turned at the words. High-value target, a faceless label. But to her he had a name, a history, a piece of her own soul fractured and twisted. Carter, shaken but alive, tried to lighten the mood. Maybe it'll be clean this time. Quick in, quick out. Nobody laughed. The streets around them whispered with unseen eyes. A dog barked in the distance, then fell silent. A window creaked open, then shut again. Shadows moved like they were alive, crawling across broken walls and shattered rooftops. They advanced, step by step, alley by alley, every sound magnified, boots scraping on stone, metal clinking against webbing, breath drawn too fast. Halfway down a narrow corridor, she caught it again, the lullaby, barely audible. A single phrase hummed into the night as though the darkness itself was mocking her. She stopped. The team surged a step ahead before realizing she wasn't moving. "You hear that?" she whispered. Reyes tilted his head, frowning. "Hear what?" The colonel shot her a warning look. "Stay sharp, focus." But she couldn't unhear it. The melody had weight, like a ghost dragging chains through her memory. Then from the rooftops, a flash, the sharp crack of a rifle. The world exploded into movement. Bullets chipped stone. Muzzle flashes lit the night like jagged lightning. The team scattered, diving for cover. She pressed against the wall, heart slamming, dust stinging her eyes. Shouts echoed, Reyes yelling about the shooter's position, Carter's panicked breathing, the colonel barking for flanking fire. She steadied her rifle, peered upward, saw him, not the one she expected, but another, masked scope glinting under the moon, cold, practiced. She exhaled, slow, and squeezed. The shot rang out, final and decisive. The figure jerked back, collapsing into shadow. Silence followed, broken only by ragged breaths. "Good shot," Reyes muttered, relief in his tone. But her hands still shook, because for a heartbeat before she fired she'd thought it might be him, that face she half remembered, half dreaded. The colonel signaled them forward, urgency in his stride. They had to keep moving. The window to intercept their target was closing. She fell in line, but her mind drifted again. What if she did face him tonight? What if the man who once held her trust now stood across her sights? Could she pull the trigger? Her chest ached with the weight of the question. And in that ache, another truth surfaced, one she hated admitting even to herself. Part of her didn't want to kill him. Part of her wanted answers. The kind that no report, no briefing, no radio transmission could ever give. And she knew, if those answers came, they'd come with a cost she wasn't sure she could bear. Why did the sound of her own boots make her feel like an intruder in her own life? She moved through the courtyard with the rest of the team, but every step felt borrowed, like someone else had written this night and handed her the script. The moon hung thin and indifferent. Shadows pooled in corners. Somewhere a child's lullaby, soft, almost lost, threaded through the air again, pulling at a place inside her that had not forgiven, not forgotten. She tasted salt on her lip and realized she had been biting it into her mouth for hours. Habit or hunger, she couldn't tell. An ache settled behind her sternum that was not entirely physical. It was the weight of years stacked behind her, the small betrayals and the quiet choices that left a girl in uniform more practiced at absence than presence. She was aware of Carter close behind, his breath a nervous metronome. Reyes was 2 steps up, posture like a wire. The colonel kept his face, an unreadable map of commands. "Keep it tight," the colonel murmured. "Words for the radios, words for their souls. We box him in. No civilians, no mistakes." No mistakes. They said it like an incantation, a prayer to a god that never answered. Her eyes kept drifting to the rooftops, to the small slivers where moonlight cut the dark. Every roof had the potential to become a verdict. Every alley could be a courtroom where loyalty was tried and judged. They moved toward the square where the informant was reported to be transferred. Lanterns hung from hooks, their flames sputtering. A market stall sagged, abandoned, a pile of fabric like a sleeping animal. The square smelled of frying oil and old smoke. A single cat threaded between crates, unafraid. Life, stubborn and petty, threaded through the theater of war. She felt something else, an awareness that stretched beyond the immediate, a memory of a long-ago evening when she and the man she searched for had watched the same sky from a small rooftop, hands close, whispering plans for a life that never happened. That memory was a wound and a map both. As they approached the square, the colonel signaled a halt. He pointed to a line of men in black uniforms at the edge of the market, more like shadows than people. "They'll move him through here," he said. "We wait, we intercept, we don't get personal." Don't get personal. It felt like an order tailored specifically to her, as if the colonel sensed the way danger lived behind her eyes and wanted it locked away. But rules fray in the night. Duty and heart are different fabrics. The first transport rolled in, an armored vehicle, its metal warm from the day's sun. Men jumped down, dragging figures from its hold. She watched, breath shallow, until the third figure stepped into the lantern light. A thin man wrapped in a blanket, head hooded, shoulders hunched. He moved like someone trying to become the smallest thing he could be. Her heart locked. It wasn't him. Relief came first, sharp and ugly. A hot prickle of something close to shame warmed her neck. Then anger at herself for wanting the relief so badly that she felt almost guilty for it. The colonel barked a command. The team moved. They were efficient, a sequence of practiced motions. The informant was guided through the square, guarded by men who moved like wind, precise, detached. They flanked him, eyes never softening. He shuffled, oblivious, a ghost among the living. She catalogued everything: the guard's gait, the way the hood slipped, a certain limp in the left ankle. Small details that meant the difference between life and a memory. Her fingers tightened on the rifle until her knuckles gleamed white. Movement at the perimeter. She turned, snapped like a wire. From the shadows, children appeared, 3 of them, eyes wide, faces streaked with dirt. They watched the scene with the curious cruelty of those who have grown up too fast. One of them stepped forward, no fear, only a raw fascination. Carter's hand brushed her sleeve. His voice was nothing more than a breath. "Captain, they're kids." She nodded. In the old days she would have smiled, found a way to make their fear smaller. Now she felt older, taught to balance responsibility on scales with no good options. They continued, and the informant was led toward a side street. The team closed in, shifting like the teeth of a trap. She could feel the net tightening. And then a sound cut across the square, the unmistakable creak of a rooftop hinge. She looked up. A figure moved like a shadow along a parapet. Not the silhouette of the man she feared, but someone agile, familiar in the way a particular gait can be. She remembered the way that person had once hopped fences with a laugh. The thought was ridiculous and immediate and dangerous. "Contact!" Reyes shouted. Shots cracked. The square dissolved into noise. Lanterns shattered, casting sparks like wounded fireflies. The children scattered. The informant stumbled, his hood falling back a fraction, revealing a face thin with terror. Hands grabbed him, pulled him. One of the guards dragged him toward a waiting van. She moved. It was not a decision so much as a muscle obeying memory. Her body had been trained for this: take ground, create cover, deny angles. Her rifle sang. A guard fell. Another dove for a crate. The informant lurched, nearly free. Her heart surged, so close. Then she saw him. Not across the square. Not in the light. Above them, a figure crouched on the roof opposite. He moved with a strange mixture of wariness and purpose. Moonlight caught his jaw. For the quarter second before she pulled the trigger, she recognized the tilt of a familiar cheek, the way his shoulders sloped under a coat heavier than the weather warranted. Her breath left her. The world narrowed. The choice was razor-thin: expose him and risk turning a complicated truth into a simple target, keep still, and let him disappear into the arms of those who would bury him alive. The rifle in her hands was suddenly heavy with history. "Vera," the colonel's voice barked over static, "focus on the target." But the man on the roof looked at her then, eyes meeting, a reckless calm in them that made her stomach drop. There was recognition, but it wasn't the warmth of old affection. It was colder, tempered by something that had hardened while she was learning to be invisible. He lifted a finger in a single, neat gesture. Do not. A split second later, the man on the van, one of the captors, shifted, revealing the informant's face fully. The sight was a blade. The informant's eyes locked on hers. Time thinned. She thought she could hear her grandmother whisper the old word for truth in her ear, as if memory could be summoned as a weapon. She pulled the trigger, not at the man on the roof, not at the informant, but at the guard who had bent to secure the informant's restraints. The shot took him through the shoulder, dropping the guard to his knees. Chaos folded over him like a blanket. The informant lunged, wild, nearly free. Someone shouted, ID, a call that could mean identification, could mean a warning. The man on the roof moved, not running but disappearing like a shadow swallowed by deeper night. She watched him go, felt the old ache twist again. He had told her once, years ago, that silence was a language of its own. Now she wondered if silence had been a promise or a threat. They gained control of the informant. He stumbled toward them, eyes wide, shivering. Reyes caught him, wrapping a blanket around thin shoulders. Carter held a flashlight under his face. For a second she let herself see him as a person, lined skin, a jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Not just intel, not a file. A human who had been moved like an object through the corridors of another's war. She stepped closer. He stared at her as if trying to pull a name from a floating pool. Mara, he whispered. The syllable fell between them like a fragile bridge. Everything in her wanted to collapse to the ground and promise things she had no right to promise. Safety, a new life, absolution. Instead she felt the old armor settle. Her answer was practical. You're coming with us. We get you to the evac point. Don't speak to anyone yet. He nodded, but his gaze kept flicking to the opposite roof, to the place where the man had vanished. A shadow of understanding passed over his face, a look she couldn't read because it was meant for someone, something else. Later, when they led the informant toward their vehicle, Carter paused, voice small. Captain, you okay? Simple, clumsy, perfect in its concern. She blinked, surprised by how raw she felt. I'm fine, she said, and it was a lie wrapped gently, the sort of lie that keeps a team moving. The convoy formed. Engines coughed, then hummed. They pulled away from the square, leaving behind the litter of broken lanterns and the small, flattened traces of lives nearly lost. As they rumbled down the road, she tried to fix the man on the roof into a theory. Ally, traitor, ghost. None fit neatly. Her chest tightened with a grief that had nothing to do with the battlefield and everything to do with the small, private history she carried. She replayed the rooftop moment in the quiet of the vehicle, watching it like a film. When the colonel's back was turned, she leaned toward Reyes and asked, voice low, "Do you ever think you could change and no one would notice?" He looked at her, surprised by the question. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Change? I don't know, maybe we all do. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that endings could be rewritten, that men who had become shadows could step back into the light and be forgiven. For a long while she said nothing. The informant slept in the seat beside her, head lolling, breath shallow. Carter snored softly 2 rows back, exhausted into dream. Reyes fiddled with a map. The colonel checked coordinates. Outside, the desert moved like an ocean. Stars blinked, indifferent. The night had given them a prize, but it had also handed her a mirror, one that showed a woman who had been shaped by silence and now stood in the middle of a story that would demand answers she might not survive. Sometimes she wondered if the truth was a kind gift or a weapon. Tonight it felt like both. Why did the quiet after a mission always feel louder than the gunfire? The engines throbbed beneath their seats, steady and monotonous, but inside the vehicle no one spoke. Dust swirled through the open slats like fine smoke, catching in the beams of the headlights. She sat with her back against cold steel, helmet balanced on her knees, rifle still warm from use. Around her, the men shifted, their silence a mix of fatigue and unspoken questions. The informant dozed, head against the window, face drawn tight even in sleep. Every so often his hand twitched, as if reliving invisible chains. Reyes drove with one hand loose on the wheel, the other tapping out a rhythm on his thigh, nerves disguising themselves as habit. Carter leaned against his pack, eyelids fluttering, body trembling with the residue of adrenaline that hadn't yet found a place to rest. She kept her gaze fixed outside. The desert rolled by, endless and empty, but her mind wasn't in the now. It was stuck on a rooftop, on eyes she thought she'd never see again. Eyes that once carried warmth, now colder, sharper, as though time itself had filed them into weapons. She should have reported him. Protocol demanded it. The colonel's debrief would be soon, and her silence was already a choice heavy enough to break her. But the words refused to come. Because if she named him, she condemned not just a man but a history. And that history was hers too. The vehicle jolted over a ditch, rattling bones. The colonel stirred, speaking for the first time in an hour. "We move the package to base camp. He's debriefed, extracted, then we move to the next phase. No distractions." His tone was clipped, matter of fact, orders disguised as reassurance. But she caught the faintest pause when his eyes flicked to her. Did he know? Did he suspect? Later at camp, the night stretched long. Lanterns cast soft circles across the sand, each one a fragile island of light. Soldiers moved like ghosts between them, murmuring, cleaning rifles, writing brief letters under canvas shelters. She wandered to the edge, away from the murmurs, staring at the horizon where the sky dissolved into black. Reyes found her there. He approached slowly as if not to startle a wild animal. "You're too quiet," he said. She gave a small, humorless laugh. "And you're too curious." "Maybe," he kicked at the sand. "But when you froze earlier, I thought, I don't know, that you saw something I didn't." Her pulse quickened. She kept her voice even. "I saw what we all saw, a rooftop threat." Reyes studied her, expression unreadable. He didn't argue, didn't press. He only nodded as though filing her answer away for later. She turned back to the desert. Silence hung heavy between them. Finally she whispered, almost to herself, "Do you ever feel like the people we used to be are watching us? Like shadows we can't shake?" Reyes exhaled slowly, "All the time." That night sleep didn't come. She lay on her cot, eyes open, listening to the desert. Somewhere a jackal cried, a lonely sound that made the emptiness more alive. The lullaby haunted her ears again, not sung, not real, but memory reshaped into sound. She pressed her palms to her face, forcing it away, but it clung. At dawn, the debrief began. The colonel stood before them, voice steady, pen scratching notes. The informant sat across the table, blanket draped over his shoulders. His eyes, still raw, still searching, kept drifting to her. She tried not to notice, but every glance felt like a question she wasn't ready to answer. Then he spoke. His voice cracked, but the words were clear. He was there. Her breath stopped. The colonel leaned forward. "Who?" The informant's eyes flicked again to her, just for a second before settling back on the colonel. His lips trembled. "The one you're after. He was watching from the rooftops." Her world tilted. Heat surged in her chest. She forced her face still, but inside everything broke open. The colonel's pen hovered, suspicion sharp in his gaze as he scanned the table. She lowered her eyes, staring at her hands, willing them not to shake. Because the truth she had hidden was no longer hers alone. It had stepped into the room, given breath and shape. And now the question wasn't if she could keep her silence. It was how long before that silence turned into betrayal. The desert night had a way of holding its breath, as if waiting for something inevitable. That same stillness had followed her into the colonel's tent, into the walls that now felt less like shelter and more like judgment. The debrief was over, but its echoes clung to her skin. The informant's words, "He was there," still rang like a distant shot. She had managed to keep her composure, but every soldier in the room had seen the way her shoulders tightened, the way her eyes refused to lift. Silence, once her shield, now painted her as guilty. She stepped outside into the brittle dawn air. The camp stirred slowly, boots crunching sand, metal clinking, low voices weaving through canvas. The horizon glowed faintly orange, but the light didn't bring warmth. If anything, it exposed cracks she could no longer hide. Reyes appeared bleary-eyed, a mug of coffee in hand. He offered it wordlessly. She shook her head. "You didn't sleep," he said, "not a question." "Neither did you." He studied her long enough to remind her that silence wasn't always safe. Then he muttered, "Whatever this is, you can't carry it alone." Her lips pressed tight. The instinct to deny was strong, but what could she say? That the ghost on the rooftop wasn't a ghost at all. That his presence cracked open years she had buried beneath steel and duty. That the war she fought inside was tearing at her faster than bullets ever could. Before she could answer, the colonel's voice cut through the camp. Orders, movement, another mission. By mid-morning they were back in the vehicles, wheels grinding over the barren land. The informant rode with them again, hunched and watchful as though danger lingered in every gust of wind. She kept her rifle across her lap, hands steady, eyes forward. But inside, her thoughts churned like a storm. They reached the outskirts of an abandoned village by noon. Buildings leaned like weary old men, windows hollow, doors half broken. The air was dry, carrying whispers of lives erased. The colonel signaled. They split into teams. She moved with Reyes, Carter, and the informant. Their boots crunched glass and sand as they advanced cautiously, rifles raised, senses sharp. Every corner felt heavy with memory. Every shadow seemed alive. Halfway through the village, the informant froze. His breath hitched. He pointed at a rooftop ahead. That's where he stood, that's where he watched. Her heart stopped. Reyes turned, studying her face. His brow furrowed, just enough. Carter whispered, "What's he talking about?" The informant's voice cracked. "The man you seek, he knew you were coming. He's not just a shadow, he's planning something." Her chest burned. She forced her voice steady. "We clear the buildings, stick to protocol." But when she glanced up at that rooftop, the sun glaring behind it, her eyes betrayed her. She searched for him, against reason, against survival, and for the briefest moment she swore she saw him. A figure still, watching. The colonel's voice crackled over comms. "Report." Her throat tightened. Words jammed like misfired rounds. Reyes answered instead, tone calm. "Sector appears clear, proceeding sweep." The figure was gone. Maybe he'd never been there. Maybe memory was tricking her into madness. They pushed on, building by building, until the village lay silent behind them. But she carried the weight of unseen eyes long after they'd left. That night, campfire shadows flickered across their faces. Soldiers murmured, trading stories, laughter, fragments of normal life. She sat apart, sharpening her knife though it didn't need sharpening. Reyes joined her again. He didn't ask this time. He just said, "If you don't tell me, someone else will figure it out, and then it won't be a choice anymore." Her grip tightened on the blade. Sparks danced as she dragged steel against stone. Finally, she whispered, "He wasn't supposed to be here, not him." Reyes frowned. "Who is he?" Her jaw clenched. The name rose to her lips, heavy as lead. She swallowed it back. "Instead," she said, "someone who once mattered more than the uniform." Reyes's eyes softened, but his voice stayed firm. "And now?" She looked into the flames, their heat biting her skin. "Now he's the silence I can't outrun." Neither spoke after that. The fire cracked, the desert breathed, and above them the stars stretched infinite, witnesses to a truth still unspoken, yet louder than any gunfire. Because tomorrow the hunt would begin again, and this time the line between duty and memory might shatter for good.